The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Nate. Nate's got a bit of story to tell. So Nate, if you can tell me when and where you were born, if you can describe to me what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received.
Yeah.
So it's all yours.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me on. I was born in the late 80s, 1987. So right there at the end of it. And I was born in a little town called Sebastian, Florida. I checked up the demographics just recently, and it's a town of about 6,000 people today. So probably less 30 years ago. But I grew up there right on the Indian River. So I kind of sometimes call myself a river rat, because that was kind of my upbringing. My family was involved in a lot of different things, but what I remember most was my grandpa Orvis had the Sportsman's Marina and Lodge, and it was right on the water. And so I'd go spend summers with my grandmother and him. It was really just my grandmother's boyfriend, but by that time. And, so I grew up on the front of a John boat, just fishing all summer. Loved that. We had a flower shop there in town. So if I wasn't with him, I was riding with my actual grandpa, my grandpa Bill, and he helped deliver flowers. So, we didn't have car seats 30 years ago. I sat on the back on a cinder block in the back of a delivery van. So speaking of school, I remember that even in the school line. So as I have kids today, I think about all the technology and safety and car seats, but I remember getting picked up in the elementary school there at Sebastian Elementary in the delivery van. Bright pink with a big rose painted on the side. Open the sliding door, not a seat in the thing, just flowers and cinder blocks and me climbing in. And that was perfectly normal. So small fishing town for sure. So fishing and the outdoor life. I mean, just imagine Florida. Like when you think Florida man, the reputation that we have is true. And so that's where I grew up. Went to Sebastian Elementary School there. By the time I was maybe in first or second grade, we moved a little bit further up the coast to the Space Coast. So this was cool because we were on the river directly across from NASA, from the launch pad. So saw a lot of space shuttle launches and the landings. And I do remember from that childhood that, the launches you were kind of like prepared for. There was most of the people that lived in our condo complex worked over there. That was part of the industry, right, for that area. So, of course, by this point, I was going to Atlantis Elementary. So Atlantis Elementary, literally, the logo was the space shuttle. That's how connected the town was. And we would watch the space shuttle go off. So, again, that was a big influence. And now in my life, I'm influenced by fishing in the river and then, the space shuttle. And so that was kind of my early foundation. And to this day, I've got a love of nature and a love of the water. And then also just anything. If I'm watching a movie, I want to watch a sci-fi movie or something from outer space. So, I mean, those are my early years, Tim, really. From there, it kind of changed if you want me to keep moving on with that path.
Well, let's just have a look at, the area that you lived in. I mean, it was opposite NASA. And,
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember, it's probably, I can't remember the date of it, but the one that blew up, and there was an awful lot of bad jokes about going at the time.
Yeah.
The acronym for NASA was need another 7 astronauts. And
So I was probably too young. I think that the Challenger is the one you're referring to, and that was in 86 or 87. So right about the time I was being born. And yeah, that was, if you go over to NASA today, you can go to Kennedy Space Center. My wife and me, we've gone and we do the tours and all that. And, they have a monument and all that stuff. So it's pretty emotional when you get in there, but they have Atlantis there. And that's really special to me, especially I went to school. Atlantis made the last flight. And when you go in that room and see the size, it's really amazing.
So, I mean, growing up around that, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, actually seeing the rocket going up and it's going into space. And I guess from whereabouts you were, you can actually feel it as it's going up. I mean, the vibration and the blast of the rockets and everything, and watching it from the playground even.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
For sure. That was a big influence, and you could feel it. You definitely could feel it, and it was a big to do, and you could see it. And I remember when it would land, you had the sonic booms from it landing. So that's what I was saying. The launch was this big countdown, and you knew about it, and you knew it was coming, and you were ready for it, and people had their lawn chairs set up. They were going to watch the binoculars, the cameras. But the landings would happen any time of day, randomly, and it was that big boom, and your house would literally rattle, like kaboom, kaboom. And as a kid, it could, like, I remember one time just like jumping out of bed, terrified. That was one of the quick memories from the landing time.
Wow. So that was in sort of your elementary school. So moving on a little bit then. So did you stay in the area? Did you? Let's hang on. Let's just take you back to your summers, and the
Okay.
fishing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the type of boat. It's like a little speedboat that was a fishing boat basically.
Yeah.
Or did you manage to do any sailing?
I never did any sailing. So Orvis had the old aluminum fishing boat, with the throttle right there on the motor, stick drive. I can't say anything that he had was ever too fancy. It was mostly,
Functional.
older boats. Yeah, functional. So it was going fishing. So we go out, and early we'd go to the bait shop and we'd get a bucket of shrimp. So it was always live bait. We'd go out, fish, and bring home, 15 to 20 fish. I mean, really, I've got the photos and stuff for it. I love those days. And we would go upstairs, and then my grandmother we would clean them right there on the dock, and then my grandmother would take them upstairs. Funny thing is, I got attacked by a pelican one time because remember I was just a little kid. I was like, this is a true story. I was like 5 years old, and here's the interesting thing about the Sportsman's Marine on Lodge. My grandpa came back. Orvis came back from World War II. He bought this land, tore down an old defunct hotel, and then built the Sportsman's Marine on Lodge. And I mean, he was a real sportsman. If he wasn't fishing at home, he was traveling in his RV and he was hunting out west or out in the plains all over the place. So, real cool guy. He was in the Navy in World War II, all that. So, we'd be on the river, and then the lodge was shut down. It was something to do with his previous marriage, of course, and something like she got the lodge, he got the house that was in the center of the lodge, but then the lodge was shut down by her. So it was almost like he was living in his dream that was like locked down. Now, I don't know the backstory. Obviously, that happened decades ago. That's their business. But I remember that distinctly. And there was another old man that like lived there too. One other property on the lodge was like functional. And this old guy came out and he goes, I'm going to take your picture. Just shake the fish a little bit. Shake the fish. It'll make it look bigger in the picture. Just go around. So I'm standing there with the biggest fish we caught that day, just like a little trout. I'm shaking this thing, and the pelican came up and took it. And not only did it took half of my arm with it. I had the teeth marks on it. So I've been bitten by a pelican, which is a weird story. But, one with nature. And then we'd go upstairs and we would, fry up these fish and every day. And then the afternoon thunderstorms would come. And thinking back, it was hot. I didn't really notice it. It was normal. But now I'm like, yeah, I don't think Orvis ever ran the air. So it was like 100 degrees in his house. He'd go in his room, take a nap. And my grandma Elsie, she'd clean the fish or fry the fish, and we'd eat them. And then me and her would sit on the back porch on the, the swing with the chains. And it would be storming so bad right out there. You couldn't even, he lived on the river on the second floor of this building, but by the time the storms hit, you couldn't even see the river anymore from the rain storm. So that was most of my days. And in the morning when I would wake up, this was really cool. There was a heron that would come eat breakfast with us. And I'm not even kidding. Again, this is weird. Remember, Orvis is a sportsman, and this heron, he would leave the sliding glass door open, and he'd make me some eggs and bacon, and then he'd make himself some eggs and bacon. But there'd be a third plate, and the third plate had raw bacon on it. And in would come this heron, and it would land on his back porch, and it would come walking right up to the table and have breakfast with us. And that was, man, that's pretty special. Like, it seemed normal. I was a kid. Again, when you're a kid, everything's normal because you're just going through life. But when you look back, you're like, what a great experience. Now, I do kind of laugh because Orvis had, everywhere, there was foxes stuffed, there was trees with stuffed squirrels going up the wall, and there was stuffed, deer and antler and this and that and bull horns above the closet. And I'm like, if this bird only knew, he wouldn't be walking into this, right? You know what I mean? If only he knew. But, I say that taught me a lot too, because that's the heart of a sportsman too, man. A true hunter, a true conservationist and person who cares, about providing for themselves and loves the animals in a way that they're providing for them, but also interacting with them on a way that most people don't interact. I don't know anybody else who lets, a wild heron come into their house to have breakfast with them. So that was definitely a cool experience growing up.
Wow, amazing. So moving on then, what was so your elementary school, your first couple of grades. Moving on slightly, what was your middle school like?
Yeah. So in middle school, this is a weird time because my dad is from the Midwest. So from Florida to the Midwest, it's about 1,600 miles up there. Totally different weather, totally landlocked. You're not near the coast or the water at all. He took a job up there, and we moved up there about the time I was 8 years old, moved to Columbus, Ohio. And, I finished middle school there. Or elementary, actually. I still had a couple grades there, but a little bit different. And then I got into middle school. So I went to Rosemore Middle, I believe, because it wasn't a junior high. It was a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade school. That's where I did play. I think I'd already given up Pee Wee football. I played Pee Wee in the younger years, but it wasn't very good and didn't have the confidence or the size, really. That's probably where the lack of confidence came from. I just wasn't that big. And then, I started playing baseball, and I was okay at baseball, but I wish I would have consistently played. But I did play at Rosemore. A little bit there, and that's where I started. I had a bike, and by this time, we didn't come for much. I talk about the lodge and all that, but we weren't anything special. I was wearing hand-me-downs. We were eating, styrofoam plate dinners at the community center, before that. And then by the time I got to middle school, things picked up a little bit. Life had increased. We had got a camper at this point in time, so now on the weekends, my family was going camping and bringing the bikes along and getting to experience all that. So again, more outdoors. We got into like canoeing during that time period, doing little trips down the river. So, I've spent a lot of time, I guess, talking about it. It kind of reminds you, because you kind of forget, when you look at who you are. But that's part of my passion for nature and the water and being outdoors really comes from those early years, it just being infused in me. And we were in Ohio for a few years, but interestingly enough, we moved back down to Tampa, Florida, which is on the opposite side of the state from Sebastian. So it's on the West Coast. So now we went from the Atlantic Ocean. Sorry, my headphones here. We went from the Atlantic Ocean over to the Gulf of Mexico, the world's most beautiful beaches, I swear, the beautiful water. So we're in Clearwater, St. Pete, Florida. And now our life has continued to get better. By this time, we move up again to a new house now this house has a swimming pool with the hot tub that overflows into the pool. You know what I mean? We're like, okay, this is good. I had some friends that their parents were small business owners at this time, one of my closest friends, her dad was a painter, and it was actually a girl I dated for a long time, and her dad was a painter. So I spent so much time at that house. I learned so much about business, and this was a guy, not necessarily a college educated guy, but just a guy who had worked hard and had built this business from the time he was 17 up. And then from there, my brother, who I'm really close with, he had a really good friend who their dad also was a business owner, but the total opposite, the college kind, the big investment kind. And so I had all those influences all the way through high school. So I really, really got exposed to quite a bit, and I'm pretty fortunate for that.
Wow. So, and you also got the Buccaneers.
Yeah, so the Bucks were huge then. Tony Dungy was the coach for so long, and then of course John Gruden came down there, and so yeah, I did get to go to Bucks games, and that was great. And by this time, actually, it's kind of funny. By this time, my grandmother Elsie, she had remarried to a guy named Donnie who lived on the Tampa Bay side. So I was still close to my grandmother all this time too. In fact, when we lived in Ohio, that was part of it. After we all moved, kind of as a family, she moved up and lived in our basement for a little bit. So my grandmother was always close to us. And after that, um, she married Donnie in Tampa. That was an interesting story. They had dated in high school, and after all these years, he kind of looked her up. They were like in their 60s, and he was like, "Hey, why don't you come down here?" So Donnie was cool. Again, he owned an air conditioning business, so some more business influence in my life. And I can't leave out my dad. My dad is a pastor. He just retired? I'm not sure it's something that you ever, but he for 40 years. He was in the ministry, had a church, and that was part of our moving. It was an interesting thing. A lot of times churches that just like the business world find themselves, maybe in financial trouble or in just leadership position. And my dad, he answered the call to take on churches that were, either had issues or were $2 million in debt or had a building that was empty. And what were they going to do next to survive and keep their congregation together? So all those public speaking and counseling and catching lessons. And then there is some business in there. It's a nonprofit business for sure, but it's in there, especially when he was taking on these churches that, were for the most part in a financial predicament, I guess. So experienced all that. And, so I had some really great leadership men in my life there.
I guess that's what kind of makes you, your background.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on then to, did you go to sort of junior high or was it just high school?
Yeah.
For
So
middle school.
by the time we got to St. Pete, Clearwater, I was in, for middle school, we just went from the 6th, 7th, 8th. And then like right at the end of 8th grade is when we moved again back down to Florida. And so that's always interesting. I don't really have too many lifelong friends. There was quite, 3 different elementary schools and a junior school, and then now a different high school. I don't have anybody that I've been running with since I was like 5 years old. And on one hand, that's unfortunate, and I want to recreate that for my kids, and I do want them to have those lifelong friends that I missed out on. But then on the other hand, at any time, if I saw an opportunity, I'm ready to pick up and move. I'm ready to move my family where I need to take them. And I don't have fear of it because I've already experienced it. So, there's a lot of benefits there, and teaching your kids that, like, because I think a lot of people hang on to, oh, I can't leave this town because I'll be leaving my friends or associates or this or that. Even if the opportunity is better for them and their family personally, they might say no to it to stay. And I would encourage people to go, just having experienced that. So, yeah, I went to high school there. I went to Osceola High School, Proud Warriors. By this time, I was totally out of sports, Tim. I played baseball. I was like on the JV team and then like the regular team. And then by 11th grade, got downgraded again. And I was like, I'm out. I guess I just don't have it. I don't have it. So, but you know what I did play? I played guitar. This whole time I started, I started in band in 5th grade when band starts. And I always had a fascination for guitar, but for some reason I picked the sax. Actually, I wanted to play drums, but you know how they are at the schools. They talk you out of things and they talk kids into things who they think would be good at this and where they need you to fill in. So I picked saxophone.
I think that's probably more it.
Yeah.
It's what needs filling rather than what you want to do.
Yeah. They're like, we need a saxophone player, and this little kid, he's not very confident. We'll convince him that that's what he wants to do, and he'll sign up for it. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, so I signed up for playing saxophone, but that only lasted like a couple years. I was like, no way. So my parents traded it in for a guitar. So I've been playing guitar and through high school, and I kind of had this attitude in high school. I was like, you know what? I was like, these guys playing football and sports, they're really good and popular right now, and that's okay. But when we're 30 years old and they're not in the NFL, what are they doing with their sport? I'm putting time into this curricular activity, and at 30 years old, I'm still going to be doing it. In fact, I still play, and I've played some pretty big places, venues, and everything from church music to country music to rock and roll music. And I really enjoy it. And late at night, the technology's gotten so good that you don't have to be. I plug my headphones in right into my equipment, and I can sit in the room and I can play even after everyone's gone to bed. To everyone else, they don't hear a thing.
So, what sort of guitar do you play?
So I've got a pair of Les Pauls. So Les Pauls are that's my thing. Playing a Gibson Les Paul. I play into a PV Classic 50. It's a tube amp. I also picked up an Epiphone, a little 5-watt amp, but a 50-watt 212 combo amp. That's what I played. Until recently, I had separate effect pedals. So when I was playing at a place called Celebration Church in Jacksonville, Florida. We got pretty spoiled there. That's where we started running wireless in-ear packs. The amplifiers were off stage. They were mic'd up. By this point, I was running multiple amps, running stereo sounds, had a sound guy just for me, adjusting what was going on in my ears. And so got really spoiled there. But recently, I just picked up what's a Head Rush gig board. And this is like it's new to me. It's all digital. It's all there in one thing. All you need is your guitar in this thing. And and so that's all you need. And then you just plug it into the system if you're at like a venue or a place that has a good, live sound. I also picked up a Charvel. I don't know if it's like a Super Strat model. So I've got some. It's good equipment. I don't have a lot, but it's all quality stuff.
And is it your bass player, or are you sort of lead harmonics? Or...
Oh yeah, I see. It's lead guitar mostly. Play lead guitar. Yeah.
And do you sing with that as well?
I used to, and when I was in high school, I did sing. I just was the front man. I didn't even play the guitar in that band. I just sang. But your voice is an instrument in itself, so if you're not practicing with it, then you're not very good.
Yeah.
So I can sing. I hum a few tunes here and there, but the days like when I was playing recently guitar, I'm just focused on my parts, adding to the sound, and I'm happy with that.
Me personally, I can't even carry a tune in a bucket.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure you could find ones in there somewhere.
I can put lots of people off when I sing.
Well, that's all right.
It's one way of closing a pub down at night for me to jump on a karaoke. Everybody leaves.
Yeah,
What
you're like, get them out of here. Get them out of here.
Start singing.
Yeah.
So that was your high school then. When you graduated, did you graduate? And
Yeah.
Did you go off to college, or what did you do next?
Okay, so talking about that experience of moving around and being confident and doing it. Yeah, I did right away. I graduated high school and I went to Point Loma Nazarene University, which is in San Diego, California. The most beautiful place on earth, I swear.
That's the other side of the world.
Absolute other side of the country. I only stayed there one semester because, see, I didn't know that this sounds crazy. Other people might be like, yeah, of course. I didn't know there was a difference in out-of-state tuition. So you go out of state, you got to get this big, and I was just going for a business degree. It was beautiful school right on the ocean. Cost a fortune. Could have got a 4-year degree in Florida for half the price, probably as one semester. So I came back. That's how I ended up in Jacksonville the first time. I came to Jacksonville to UNF. So I was going for real estate and marketing business. And that's been a passion of mine, going back to the lodge and all that kind of job. Those were very entrepreneurial type of jobs, not your typical 9-to-5s. Every influence in my life, I don't know, Tim, that I could just get a job. So I wasn't going to school for that. I was going to school entrepreneurial. So then I found out you could get your real estate license with a 60-hour class. You don't need college. So I quit college and naturally, like as you should, and got my 60-hour credit. Yeah, sure. And got my real estate license in spring of, I think, like 2007. Of course, we had the biggest housing recession of all just a short time after that. So I left college. I went back home to Tampa and I was staying with my parents. And this is like 2009 now. So I graduated high school in 2006. So all this happened in like a 3-year period, a couple years of school, quit school, get a course, start being a salesperson, but I wasn't making enough money to either A, not live with mom and dad, or B, not work at the mall. So I worked at the mall at a store that sold suits so I could get a discount and dress nice at my real estate job. And I might go do that again because suits are getting expensive. But but I lived home with mom and dad. When that recession hit so hard, everybody changed jobs, including my parents. Even my parents, they were kind of mobile at that time. So we didn't have a house. We didn't have anything. And I was like, okay, I'm either going to go in the, yeah.
I thought you said your dad was a pastor, a vicar.
Yes.
I mean, they just moved to a different church. And,
Yes.
And they get looked after.
Yeah, absolutely. Except now they're gone, and where am I going to live? So that was fine. And but I'm like 21 years old, and it's like, okay, either go with mom and dad and keep living with them, or I figure this out on my own. And Tim, that is how I ended up in the Navy. So that's where the Navy story starts, really, for me. Yeah.
So how did that come about? Because you're scratching around, there's a bit of a recession on.
Yeah.
And then, and I bet you was walking down the road one day and you saw, come and join the Navy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's specifically, the ad they were running was Jumpstart Your Career. So it's very career minded. So remember September 11th, 2001, that was my 8th grade school year. And then we moved back down to Florida. It's still now you've kicked off the Afghanistan and the Iraq wars. And again, Grandpa Bill was in Korean War. Yes.
I remember 9/11 very well.
Okay.
I was actually in Macedonia at the time on an operation there. And I was sat outside a camp called Camp Able Sentry, which was an American base in Skopje. And I was listening to the radio in the car while the guys were inside doing a bit of shopping at the PX. And they said that a plane had crashed into one of the Twin Towers. I thought, that doesn't sound good. So I shot in, grabbed the guys, we shot back to our base, went into the ops room, we got some big TVs up on the screen. And as we got into the ops room, we saw the second plane going to the other tower.
Yeah.
And we had some Americans working with us, and what they were coming out with was quite scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so 5 months later, I found myself in Kabul in Afghanistan.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And so that was kind of, and so I already had somewhat of a patriotic upbringing. My Grandpa Bill being in Korea, my Grandpa Orvis in World War II. But other than that, like my uncles or my dad, nobody had like a real military experience. So we didn't really know what to expect. And all through high school, I kind of thought, I was like, I'm just going to Iraq. I'm signing up. I'm out of here. I'm going to join the Marine Corps, and I'm going. Like I wanted to go, and you know how it is. You kind of like come down to it and you're like, what am I really going to do?
That's a boy's own adventure. It's funny you should say that. During conflicts, and we've seen quite a lot over the years with the first Gulf War, the Balkans, and then the second Gulf War, then Afghanistan and Iraq. And while you've got those conflicts on, lots and lots of guys are signing up to go and do a boy's own adventure. So they come into the army, they get trained up, they go into deployment, they have their 6 months in a war fighting zone, and they come back and then they leave and they go back into the civilian world, having had most of them quite a good experience of boy's own adventure.
Yeah.
And that's when the problems start, I guess.
Yeah. And so that would have been, me had I left right out of high school. But instead, I followed my first passion, which was real estate, of course. And by the time it rolled back around. Now I'm 22 years old. I'm not 17 or 18 signing up. I'm 22 years old. And like you said, there's a kind of a recession and there's interesting stuff and the wars have gone on now. It's, 2009, you're like talking 8 years later, you've got this stuff. And so what are you going to do? Well, the Navy's like, hey, jumpstart your career. It's very career minded. I had grown up, remember my passion for the water. So at 15, 16, I started teaching swimming lessons. I'm a lifeguard at a swimming pool. Then I become a head guard there quickly. Tim, it's not that I don't want to. Okay. So a lot of people will be like, Nate, you're good at everything you do. And it's not that I'm good at everything I do. That is true. But I only do what I'm good at. The other stuff, like I told you, I didn't play football. I didn't play baseball because I wasn't good at it. So I left. So I focused on the things I was good at and I get better at those things and forget the rest. And then I have a much more enjoyable life because of it. But I was good in the water. I'm good underwater. I'm comfortable in that environment. I love it. A kid with a split head on the pool deck. Let me take care of this and fix this kid up. No problem. Let me teach this kid. This kid is screaming in my ears because he can't swim. I'm going to take him out in the water and teach him how to swim. And it doesn't bother me. I've worked with everybody, my nephews and my nieces and people's young kids. I love it. And especially living in Florida and there's so much water, not just the oceans, but lakes and rivers and ponds, and every neighborhood has a retention pond. And it's like, and everybody's got a swimming pool. Like, you better teach your kids how to swim. So I get real passionate about things. And so I had that experience. And so as I start looking at careers, I'm going to the Navy because I'm like, let me see. I'm smart and I've got some experience and some qualifications that maybe I can get a good job. And the Navy's one that you can sign up for your job before you go to boot camp. So you can get, as long as you pass your schools, then you get that job. Now, I didn't really trust that. I didn't really believe it. I still thought that I was like, yeah, okay, sure. But it came true. So I went in there. I was like, what kind of special programs do you have? Took the test, scored high on the test. So I was able to pick any job I wanted to pick. And, they have special programs and they have special warfare. So the search and rescue program is not special warfare. It's still a special program. So you did get a bonus at the time. The bonus was $25,000. And, the Navy SEAL bonus was like $40,000 at the time. And I know how hard that is. And I didn't know that if I had that in me, but I knew if I did this rescue swimmer program, like I said, I'm only going to do what I'm good at. It's just, I'm going to bet on myself. This is where I'm going to succeed. I love aviation. That's another thing. My dad has his private pilot license. We used to go to air shows, all that stuff. So again, the culmination, I'm only the sum of all my life events and experiences. And so I signed up to be a search and rescue swimmer. It's a 6-year program. It's a 4-year commitment with 2 years of school. There's about 5 schools on the front end that you're going to. There are rescue swimmer, they were touting like a 75% attrition rate. I think our original class, that's a story. I kind of got kicked out once, but stayed in, which was fortunate. But the original class that started with 24 people graduated with 6 people. Okay. So
pretty tough course then.
Yeah, it's pretty
like Special Forces. I mean, that's the sort of drop-off rate that Special Forces has.
Yes. Yeah. I would say that to get into the program is a little easier. So maybe and a lot of guys that roll out of BUDS, basic underwater demolition school for Navy SEAL. A lot of those guys roll into rescue swimmer school as a choice. Now, at this point, the Navy doesn't give them any bonus or anything. And they kind of show up and they're mad at themselves for walking away from BUDS. And now they're doing this rescue swimmer stuff that is it's easier for sure. And they're frustrated and they're mad because they signed up for one thing and now they're here. So when I say I got kicked out, those were the guys that I hung out with. I kind of connected with those guys the most. Like I said, I was always kind of patriotic and a little bit kind of like that river rat, kind of tough, I guess. And so I hung out with those guys, and the instructors would often try to teach those guys a lesson, kind of kick them out and then bring them in for a hashing. And so I remember that I'm sitting at the board, and this is my board with the senior chief. And, here's one thing about me, Tim. If I pick up on the fact that you're trying to put words in my mouth, even if I agree with those words, I will say the opposite because I just will not do it. So instance, I'm sitting at the board and they're asking you, do you even want to be here, and this and that, and you're kind of scared and nervous and all that stuff. And so sitting there at the board, and the senior chief is like signing these papers. I don't know what he's signing, because they still don't tell you if you're going to get kicked out or you're going to stay. But I remember one of Darian Durr. I still talk to him on Facebook once in a while. So if he's listening, maybe he'll hear his name. But he asked the question. He was like, Nate, because they used to say at the time, if you dropped out of the program, you'd go needs of the Navy, but then you could sign up as long as you had good behavior and all that stuff and come back in 2 years, try again, And he would say, oh, if you got kicked out today, would you come back in 2 years? And you know what? They're trying to tell you, oh, yes. Oh, I'll do anything. I'll do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. I want to be here. And you know what I told him in that room? And I said, I don't know. I might be really liking my job at that time, so maybe not. And man, if the senior chief didn't get so mad at me for saying that, and he was like, if I hadn't already signed you back in, I would sign you out. Maybe, it's funny though. Once you get into that community, and once you get in that tight community, you at first you're like, man, that was close. But once you get in, they're like, that's the answer we wanted to hear. That's why you're still here. So, because we were just all a bunch of, our personality was just, everybody was really aggressive.
So, 2 years, schooling bits, and then a 4-year commitment after that.
That's right.
That's quite a commitment. 6 years of your life.
It is. It is.
And then you ended up doing another 4, did you?
I did another 4. So after a 2-year training, I went to my first squadron, HSL 42. And remember, we're a multi-role helicopter. So we don't only do search and rescue, but we have radar and we have sonar. So we're extended range platform for the ship. So when you deploy on the ship, there's all these different things. But, radar can only see so far. And so if a helicopter gets up and away, then it can see a little bit further, and we can signal back to the ship and say, here's what's out here, here's what's here, like an eye in the sky. And we would run that. So did a small bore deployment. We also, we did have 50 cal and M240. So I kind of went down that path. So what I'm saying is a lot of guys kind of start identifying with, what are they going to be? Are you going to be a weapons instructor? Are you going to be a search and rescue guy? Are you going to be like a radar guy? You know what I mean? Are you going to get really into that instructor stuff? For me, the passion was, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. That's okay. So were you operating off of a carrier?
Yeah.
So for that search and rescue, they send off the jets and you have to be in the air for when they're coming back in case they have to ditch and all the rest of the malarkey.
Yeah.
So you did that.
That's it. So I was on the carrier at the time. So I went, and then we had several deployments, but I was deployed to the Truman. So with this, we're deployed with our whole shop. We bring, 8, 9 helicopters, and we do that. Now there's 2. I didn't do any vertical replenishment. Some of the helicopters are more outfitted for they deliver mail. They do exactly what you're talking about, a lot of starboard D. We would do that occasionally. They did it more than us because mainly we took on the, that tactical job of getting out there to see who's there. So yeah, I've done plenty of circles around boats where, you've got rocket launchers and guns pointed at you, and you're sitting in the back, and the ship's radioing you, and they're like, don't have a threatening posture. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to get this gun loaded. And they're like, that was one war. They didn't want us to open the ammo. No, they didn't want us to open the ammo can because they were like, no, don't open the ammo can, because then the AOs, the guys the maintenance guys who handle weapons, they're going to have to recount those rounds to allocate for them. And and I'm like, bro, I'm flying over here in the Persian Gulf off the coast of Iran and Iraq and out here and these places. And then they're like, hey, we need you to get closer to those guys. I'm like, they have a 50 cal in the front, and there's a guy with a rocket launcher, and the third guy has a video camera, and he doesn't have, that's what they do. They have, you've been there. They've got rocket launcher, 50 cal, and then the guy with the video camera only has you. So he doesn't have in frame, and it's strategic so that we come in, and if we have guns loaded, then they're going to put out on their TV networks into the world, oh, look what the U.S. Navy's doing to us. We're out here minding our own business, just fishermen. and these guys are doing this. And they're like, get closer. We got to get them on camera. Get closer. And I'm like, I'm done. I quit. I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore, because they didn't want to count the rounds in case we didn't have to use them or something. I'm like, boy, that'd be terrible, wouldn't it?
That's
So
like having having stores in the stores. It's for storing, not for using. So,
right.
And it's the same with the ammunition. You can't have ammunition in case you have to use it. Then we've got to replenish it. And
absolutely,
it's paperwork.
It was so frustrating. And so, but you know what happened? I had a good senior chief at the time, and so, and part of this came down to some of the leadership, which the leadership happens to be the pilots. And sometimes the pilots, they just don't. I don't think that they understand the time it takes to open an ammo can, prep them right. You know, they're in cardboard boxes inside the ammo can. First, you got to link the belts, and you got to dispose of the trash. Then you got to get that thing. You know, this is not a split-second job here. I have to be prepped and ready when I get on scene if you want to use that gun. And a lot of them had the mentality like, okay, we're going to not create a threatening posture. If we get shot at, then you can open the can load and shoot in defense as we run away. And I'm kind of like, no, we're never going to get a round off. We're just going to take it in the fuel tank or in my chest, and I'm done. And so I did, guess who was in charge of training? It was me, training all the pilots and senior leadership. And all you got to do, this is how you train senior leadership in the helicopter world, is put them in the back once and make them do a job that they've never done and time them. And they're like, okay, fine. Yes, that's fine. Do what you need to do. So things got better after that. So I was happy to make a difference. And that's how it goes back to kind of my set. You know, Tim, I got 3 rules. Can I share these rules with you?
Yeah.
And they did help me. Sometimes they get you into trouble, but I live by these rules. 1, you be the best at what you do, and then you can do whatever you want and talk as much trash as you want, and nobody can say anything to you. And so rule number 2, if you don't know what you're doing, act like you know what you're doing, and people won't question you on it. And rule number 3 is, what's the worst that could happen? And so I look at a situation and I balance it out. I'm either going to be the best at this, or I am going to work as hard as I can, and in the meantime, act like I'm the best at it so nobody asks me. And what's the worst that could happen? You know, I don't know. You get yelled at, or you mess something up and you got to start over. But that was how, I kind of always took that approach. Like, look, if I'm going to be back here, I'm going to do the best job I can in the back of this aircraft. And I can't do the best job I can be if you're like, hold me back, or you got some silly rules because you don't want someone to have to count the store. So anyway, it was good teaching. And then I went from there the way I did the other 4. I re-enlisted while I was on that deployment. And then I moved to HSM 40, which is an instructor school. So then I started instructing. And by this point, like I told you, I had identified more with the weapons than anything else. And so I was signing up for, when you're in the military, the door will open for like, hey, do you want to go to this school? Do you want to get this extra qualification? Do you want this side job? And so I took all the weapons. Like if they were like, hey, you want to go to advanced search and rescue school? And I'd be like, no. Do you want to go to advanced weapons school? Yes, I do. Sign me up. I'm going there. I want to teach these weapons. I want to be good with these things. And so I did that. And so then once I got to HSM 40, I was a weapons qual guy, which isn't the best qual to have at HSM 40 because cleaning 50 cals and M240s is a lot of work, especially when the people you're cleaning them with are students and have no clue what they're doing. And it's different. Like for me to go requal, okay, I got to shoot like 200 rounds or whatever it was. I forget. But yeah, I shoot like 2 cans, 200 rounds, and I'm requalled every like 90 days. Fine, I clean it. Now you take the kids out and you just put like 2,400 rounds through like 3 different weapons. And you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be here all night cleaning these things, And not only that, here's how it works too. You come back and you land on the helicopter, and now you got to wait for the AOs to take the guns off. And so now you can just go upstairs and you sit around in the shop. Then you're like, hey, are the AOs ready? Oh no, they got to cut a MAF, maintenance action form. And then maintenance control has to sign off on the MAF, and then they got to get it back to them. And then they're going to call it. Then you come down, okay. And then you get there. Where are the rags? Oh, they're at the thing. So then you go to the room and you got to check out the rags. Everything is like, categorized, and where are the rags? Oh, you don't have access to rags. Like, what do you mean? So now you got to hunt someone down who's got like the right key card or whatever to go get the rags. So it's not a matter of just like we landed and then I cleaned and went home all day. but I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. And then while I was there, here's the thing, Tim, 18 months out, everybody wants you to be a career guy. Everybody wants you to be a career guy. And it's a tight brotherhood. The shop is a brotherhood. The rescue swimmer shop, really tight-knit guys. And even if you in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't think I want to do this forever. I want to get back to, what I wanted to do. You can't say it. You got to keep it a secret. And you still got to do all the extra jobs, signing up to work the like concession stands and the extra stuff you do, because that's the only way you can succeed. You can't succeed at just being good at your job for some reason. You have to do extra. And the Navy puts out a form called a Seaway package, they call it, but a Seaway form, 18 months to the day that your enlistment ends. And that's when you submit your paperwork that says, I intend to reenlist or I do not intend to reenlist. So the secret's out. A year and a half, secret's out. And so from that point, I turned on my real estate license again. And I was like, I just went in and told him, I was like, I'm going to be the best instructor you have in the aircraft or in the classroom. I'm not going to volunteer at the baseball games. I'm not taking on, the shop financial guy and running the shop dues. You know what I mean? I'm not, getting the pallets ready for the guys who are graduating and leave. I'm just not doing it. I'm going to teach, and then I'm going to focus on myself because I have a family, and I got to make sure that when I go from contract job to back out into the world, like that they're provided for. We got a house bill now. We got a family. I was divorced once. You pay child support. You know what I'm saying? You got to get all this stuff in line. So that's where, if I could keep going, that's where you find out who in the brotherhood is really your advocate and who isn't.
Yeah.
I don't want to put a label on those other guys. And most of those guys too, once you prove yourself on the outside world, they come back around. They're fine. But for some reason, man, they take it so personal that you're leaving. You got other guys that are championing you. They're like, they're going to support your decision. Yeah, I'll cover, don't worry about coming in for this. Then you got other guys and they're like, you should be, signing up for these volunteer things. And you're like, I can't. I've got to work my other job on the weekends because that's how I'm going to get it going so that, I'm ready.
Yeah.
So that was a challenging time. 18 months working 2 big jobs, one sales, one's instructor, kids, wife, everybody. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's it then. So what happened when you finally you did your 18 months, I guess, your resettlement? In the British Army, you do that sort of time. You get a resettlement package, and so the last for us is a year.
Okay.
You're looking at the end date. You're putting your courses in, and all the rest of it. You get your resettlement, your leave. You get your annual leave, and you get an actual. You're leaving you leave the job on that day, and your final day's pay is on about 2 months later when you finished all your leave.
Yes.
And then you're out. So you do it over 18 months.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess ours is over 2 years, but it's a year when you do the 7 clicks, we call it 7 clicks.
Yeah, just steps. Freedom. That's right. Yeah, because we have a school too. They send you out, and you can't yell at your coworkers when you go out into the real world or this or that kind of thing. And Tim, you know what? I didn't realize how much I fought. Now, I don't mean that bad, but I've gotten like I miss fighting. I didn't know I fought at all. I think the reason is because we fought in the shop for fun. Nobody was mad. It was just a guy who's the next guy comes in the door, somebody jumping. 20 guys sitting around bored. Next guy comes in, boom, it's a brawl. There's staplers and 3-hole punches involved. I mean, there's no holds bar. You're unbolting a guy's chair, so when he comes in the room, the chair collapses and falls on the floor. A fight ensues, but it's all fun. It's all fun. There's missing teeth. There's eyes getting stitched up and everything. And it was just for fun. And then you get out and you're in the office and you're like, so nobody fights around here. Like, you know what I mean? You don't even realize it's a thing. So I did miss that. Yeah. So I went to all those classes and we had a cool one. This was cool because I was going into real estate, but there was an opportunity for a 3-month class. They call it Skill Bridge. So you can actually leave the command. It kind of hurts the command because you still are holding on to that billet. And so they don't have somebody to fill your spot. So you kind of leave, but you're looking out for your own at that time. So I left, and it was like a construction school. So I really got to, you basically worked yourself to an apprentice level at like framing and floors and walls. And the Navy is making sure you got a fallback. So that was a good school. Funny story, Tim. I went to do, so all those schools that you're talking about, and then Skill Bridge and everything else, you have to route this paperwork through admin. They sign it. It goes all the way up to the CO. Most of these, they sign it. They sign it. They sign it. So for 18 months, for the last year, they're sign. This stuff getting routed. So I come back. So I go there, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting it time. And I go to put my leave, my separation leave in, terminal leave. I submit, I'm here to give you my leave chit, admin. And they were like, for what? And I was like, well, you see, I'm separating from the Navy. And they're like, we didn't have you down as that. So apparently, just like you get orders to go from here to there, you have to get orders to leave. And they had not requested these orders, Tim. So I couldn't go on my leave. So I had to take regular leave for like 2 months while they waited for the orders, go back in, suit up, shave, cut my hair after 2 months. I thought I was on my way. No. And then I had to come in, sign the papers, and then submit my terminal leave. And while I was on that regular leave, they had their like fitness exam. And one of the master chiefs called me. He's like, you got to come in and do your fitness exam. And I was in Tennessee. I wasn't even here. I was like, no, I'm not. He's like, well, since you're not on terminal leave, you got to do it. And I was like, bro. And I do feel bad because I did. Yeah. At that point, I was mentally checked out. And I was like, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, I yelled at him, and I was like, this is your, yeah. I'm like, if you guys had your stuff together, I wouldn't even be, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, it all worked out. He was one of the nicest guys too. That's why I feel bad, because I'm like, he was one of the greatest guys. So anyway, it all worked out, and I got into real estate, and I've been slowly, building that. And so that was January of 2020. That's interesting, Tim. So remember, the recession happened, all that stuff happened, which caused me to go into the Navy to, put real estate on pause. Now I've got 2 kids at the time. I've got a house bill, way more responsibilities than I had when I was 20. I leave the Navy January 2020, and March 2020, COVID hits the world. And you're like, oh, you have got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding. Yeah, not kidding. It was the real deal. But you know what, man? Our office shut down. Everything closed up. But me and one other guy, we had this massive, I'm talking like, 15,000 square foot office space that we were just paying unbelievable amount monthly to rent. And the world shut down. And I was like, I ain't shutting down. I'm going to work. I went to work every single day. I had a no shoe policy. I wore my bathing suit and no shoes at the office. But you know what I did? I just did care. I knew like business and stuff. Nobody wants to talk business when that was going on. So I just did care calls. What I know best, checking up on people, that counseling side of me, that rescue swimmer motto is so others may live. And when you look at it, it's easy to be like, I'll do what it takes. I'll put it all on the line, at all costs. I'll pay the ultimate price to make sure that this stranger gets to go home to their family, if that's what's asked of me. So how hard is it when the world shuts down to go into work and make phone calls to all your people to say, hey, how you doing? Are you okay? Because if you're going to sit there and say, I will make the ultimate sacrifice for somebody. Well, what about not the ultimate sacrifice? Because a lot of times, a lot of people want to say that, and a lot of people want to live by that code. And then small things that are easy things, they almost feel like they're kind of below them, or they don't want to put time into them. So I made sure, I was like, you know what my work is going to be during this time is I'm going to go to the office. I'm just going to call people. How are you doing? You doing okay? Is your family okay? How is everything? Everybody that was in my database, everybody that I knew. And I did that. And I'll tell you what, the business has been pretty successful. And although there wasn't a lot of business during that time period, there was after. And a lot of those people called me. And I didn't do it for the business. I did it because I didn't know what else to do than be good to people. And, being good to people, I think just always, I should add that to my rules, right? Like number 4, just be good to people.
That always helps.
Yeah.
I think I live by a set of values and standards, and one of them is respect for others, and
Yeah.
treat people as though you would like to be treated yourself, and you ain't going to go too far wrong in life. So if you're nice to people, generally they're going to be nice back to you, and that's the way I've lived my life, and I think it's worked.
Yeah.
I think I get respect from people, and I give respect out, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
a good way to be.
Yeah. So when I was building the team, I pull a lot from my Navy experience. And I think that's what I'm still super involved with the guys. I still go to the shop. I still got an ID. I still get on base. So it's great now. I'll tell you, Tim, I've kind of learned how to. I wear my regular clothes like I'm wearing today, and I decided I didn't go in the reserves after because I didn't want to cut my hair. You can see it's out here. It's a mess. And so I didn't go in the reserves. I didn't do any of that, but I still have access to the base. So I'll go over to the hangar and, all 5 squadrons are right there. It's like one big massive hangar, and, 70 is there. And then there's 74. And then there's, 60, and then there's 46, and then there's, I don't know why they go out of order. And then there's 72 down at the end. I was at 72 back in the day, but I go there, and now all my brothers, because every 3 years, these guys are rotating around. So I've got brothers in every single shop. They know every single shop. And I go there, and I'll spend the day. I'll walk up in the shop. I'll just check in. Hey, I'm here. And I go to the shop. Somebody that I know is going to be there or a student that I trained. And I'll just hang out, and I'll hang out for a little bit and then be like, well, I got to get on my way. And then I'll walk down the hall to the next one, walk in there. Who's up in here today? What's up? It's almost better. Tim, I tell them it's almost better. I'm like, listen, I got it made, guys, because I still get to come hang out at the shop with you guys, sit around and talk just like I did before. Except now I don't got to do all the flights. I don't got to cut my hair. I don't got to wear the uniform. And so, I'm still and they laugh, and they tell me some of the stories. I can't repeat some of the stories. This is, I don't know what we can repeat, but I go in there and I'm like, man, we just laugh. Forget those times, when you were like 20 and wild, and sometimes it's embarrassing. Even you're like, I can't believe I did that stuff. Now I'm trying to be a good example to people, but that's a part of life, right? You kind of grow up.
That's where growing up comes into it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Showing growth is probably the best example you can set,
Yeah. So bring us up to date. What are you up to at the moment?
Well, right now, so mainly back into real estate, full speed real estate. I'm here in Jacksonville, downtown Jacksonville. I've got an office. You guys are sitting in my office with me right here. Pretty cool. We love this space. We're in a tower. We're on the 3rd floor, but there's a restaurant on the 1st floor and then a rooftop bar on the 9th floor that overlooks the St. Johns River. You can't beat it. You go up there. Maybe after we're done, I'll go up there and have a soda or something. But so doing real estate, I do have a small real estate team. It's mainly just me, but I've got some staff on the side that, we use. It's the rigs group. So to be able to go, we're now 2.5 years out. And remember, 18 months, I reactivated my license. So May of 2018 is when I turned my license back on. So 4 years now. And we've had pretty good success last year and this year. Really picked up speed doing, about 25 units. Last year, close to 6 million in volume. This year, we're going to probably touch 10 million volume, which is pretty exciting. All that with really low overhead. This has all been done through personal connections and talking to people and sharing things and getting on podcasts and doing social media and things like that. So real estate's really my biggest passion. And what I love about it is, Tim, when I went to boot camp, they hand out credit cards. Like Navy Federal Credit Union comes in there and they hand out credit cards, and you're at boot camp for 2 months. You're getting paid while you're in there for 2 months. And I know everybody has life circumstances, but for the most part, it's young kids that should have no debt, should have very little life responsibility. Once in a while, there's like old guys, so it's like 30-year-olds in boot camp. That's kind of interesting, but they come in there and they hand out credit cards with cash advance in case you're in a bind. You should leave boot camp with a couple months saving in the bank already. And then you go to your program and you should get bonuses. Like so many others before, I found myself and part of my first marriage and this and that being in heavy debt. And that was a problem. And I'm passionate about real estate because if instead of handing out credit cards at boot camp, they came in and taught guys about, financial wealth building, even, I'm not even talking about on the investor level. I'm just talking about wise financial decisions. I think a lot of guys would be better off. I should have been able to do 10 years in the Navy and have a portfolio of 4, 5, 10 houses, Excuse me, hold on a second. So that being said, I'm reaching out to these guys, and I really want it. I've got a bunch of books behind me. I've got books, Your First Home. I've got books about investing in real estate, and even at a small level. And we looked at some stats last week, like, somebody who never purchased a home and just rented a home their entire life at the age of retirement, their net worth on average in America is $6,500, which is not that much. On the contrast, somebody who owned a home, and this is not an investor, just a person who bought a house, lived in that house, paid it off, saved money, made responsible decisions at retirement age, their net worth is 255 on average. It's actually higher. It's actually a little higher. That's like the average. Everybody, it's like closer to like 300. We read these stats last week on a podcast I was on. But I say that because so many people, especially Navy guys, you're moving around. I know some Navy guys who did this right. When they were in training, they bought a house. Then they moved to their next place. They didn't sell that house. They kept it. They rented that house to someone else.
Yeah.
They bought a new house where they went. Now they get out of the service after 20 years. And because, to be honest, if you do a 20-year retirement, it's really not enough to live off of. Most of those guys rotate back in to a contract job and do another 20 years. So they do 40 total years to retire. But if you bought real estate investment properties over that 20 years, then you could retire at 20 years and truthfully have a great 6-figure income to just live off. You would never have to work. So imagine being 18 years old, going in the service, getting out at 38 and never having to work unless you wanted to. You could focus. Then you could focus on whatever. You want to open up a wood shop. You want to open up a barber shop. You want to continue your real estate investment path. You have that option to do that. You don't have to go out and get another full-time 9-to-5. So we definitely work with people to inspire that. The Riggs Group, it's a great team in Jacksonville, Florida. Pretty proud of it. I'm proud that we've done it with low overhead. We haven't bought any leads. We haven't bought really any advertisements. It's all just been through the people we know, through the people I know. And so it's worked out really good.
Terrific. So that's where you are now.
Yeah, 3 kids. They started school. That's actually why I kind of had to mute a couple times from this cough. My kids started daycare so that my wife could come work at the office and run some stuff. And then they got me the crud from the day. I'm blaming them because they come home with the runny nose. They come home with the runny nose from daycare, because they haven't been, one's 3. So we have a 7-year-old daughter because, like I said, I was married before. She's with us half the time. And then I've got one that turned 3 yesterday, actually, a little boy, and then another little boy that's a year and a half. So we're busy family. It's been me. My wife has been a stay-at-home mom this whole time. I'm super excited that we were able to do that. However, I think even for her, she was like, I kind of want to get out a little bit more. Exciting. You should have her on here. She was an airframer she was an airframer in the Navy. That's how we met, actually, too. So after, my first marriage kind of fell apart, I was like, I remember meeting that girl. I'm going to call her. I'm like, no way. I've got a kid. I've been divorced, dead up to my eyeballs. She ain't going to call me. She came out, and she was in California, so I got her to move here. She was an airframer on F-18s, so ran all the flight control surfaces and hydraulics and stuff. That's really good because we can talk about our experiences and we understand each other. So CTM was smart. I got her to sign up for the reserves here in Jacksonville. So that's how we still get. All right, okay, because that way I didn't have
commissary and all
okay,
that.
Yeah, that way I didn't have to do it, but that's how I still have an ID. So now I just get to go hang out on base. I'm that guy. But my whole job is centered around personal connections and relationships. So that's what I focus on. But she's actually taken a job here she's done a lot of behind the scenes work for me. She's been great. So she's like, I want out of the house a little bit more. So we put the boys in school. She took a job here at the office, not under me, but under like the parent company, which is great because they're paying her and not me. So it adds to,
As to the household funds.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're still in the same world. And it's kind of like how we were in the Navy. We were never at the same squadron, but we were on the same boat. You know what I mean? You're kind of like around each other. You get to enjoy each other's company. Okay, I'm going to go back to work. You go back to work. We'll see you later. It works out. So that's where it's going. All of our stuff is, I go by Nate Riggs Official. It kind of just happened. Nate Riggs, I made it on my social media. And it was kind of a play because you know how like Twitter and Instagram, if you get so famous, this is the official contact. So I just made my Nate Riggs Official was the name of it. And guys at the shop like literally started calling me Nate Riggs Official and this and that. So it kind of stuck. So we are excited because we're actually launching a new website. The website's not up yet. It may be up by the time you hear this, but it's just nateriggsofficial.com. And on nateriggsofficial.com is where everything from our podcast to our blog to our YouTubes and our Instagram, everything, it lives right there. So I used to get on these and I would have to, well, how do we get in touch with you? How do we find you? And well, if you're looking for me here or there, here, now it's one thing, Nate Riggs Official, and it's all there.
Boom. Done.
That's it.
Sweet as a nut.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nate, that's terrific. I mean, that's quite a life. You've had a fair old crack at it.
I have. I've done a lot of living. Somebody had said that to me, it was a guy in a band. He was a singer and guitar player. And, we would go get coffee. And that was during like kind of like post-divorce years and all that. And because when you're young military, I don't know how much time we have, Tim, but when you're a young military guy, it's almost like there's a checklist. Like you go through your training, check. You get to your next squadron, check. Oh, you want to get a housing allowance? Not if you're single. Oh, better get married. Check. You know what I mean? You kind of, now I don't want to get too deep, but I believe that's part of their retention program, keeping guys in. You get them in dead up to their eyeballs. It's hard for them to quit. Anyway, you didn't hear from me, but anyways. So yeah, and I met with a guy and he said that exact thing. You've done a lot of living, and when I evaluate it, like I'm pretty proud of it to go from sitting on the front of a John boat to now kind of running my own business, continuing to try to find ways to learn and grow and pour into other people. I put out a thing this morning on my Instagram and it's really true. I don't really put out anything that's just salesy or fake, but you see I got my books behind me and I got more on audio and podcasts, and on my calendar every morning from 8 to 9 is market research and reading. I mean, it's the most important part of my day is I come in here and I just, maybe I'm spending 30 minutes in this book here, or maybe it's 15 minutes in this book because reading the news took longer or whatever it is. But I'm trying to study and gain that knowledge because I know when you're in the Navy, when you have a 9 to 5, you don't get the opportunity to go to work and spend an hour reading. And so how do you stay informed? You have to kind of pick up on podcasts or shows or this or that. And so I see it as part of my responsibility. If I'm going to establish myself as your go-to source for knowledge, on real estate and on financial, growth, then like I need to put the time in to learn it so that when you come to me and, I'm able to pour into you. So that's a big part of my day.
Brilliant. Well, that's pretty awesome. So it's the way forward.
Yeah. And so I appreciate it, man. I've enjoyed telling the story. I like this story too, because sometimes it's too heavy. A lot of people just want to hear like just a military story or just a business story or just, or just where are you as a dad? Where are you as this? And, this format is a great format to be able to kind of cover all of that, kind of in one. It's condensed. We could go down any one of those roads and probably do a show just as long with just one of those topics. But it has been great talking to you, Tim, for sure.
But this will leave a legacy for your children and your children's children.
Yeah.
So they can see what you did with your life. And hopefully been a bit of an inspiration for them. And
I hope so.
That's what it's all about, is leaving that legacy.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, no problem, Tim. Thank you for giving me the time to do so, for sure.
You're welcome.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.